All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to get settled here and get started with the second half of our morning. I'm Gary Sagan with Monsanto and Vice Chair of this year's committee. So I'd like to begin by thanking MoCan NAMA for sponsoring today's break and welcoming you to the second part of our general session this morning, sponsored by Syngenta. And to kick things off, we have another prestigious award to recognize, to present this morning. It's the NAMA Marketer of the Year Award. NAMA recognizes its active members with senior management of marketing or sales responsibilities with the NAMA Marketer of the Year Award, which is sponsored by Agri-Marketing Magazine. This is the most prestigious honor awarded to active members of the association. And this year's honor is Steve Vanderberg, Director, Insecticide Marketing with Muriel Limited. Steve's work in parasiticides pioneered a golden era for the cattle industry. He developed the launch campaign for Ivomec, the iconic industry brand, thus creating the cattle insecticide category and one of the first $100 million dose form cattle products in the U.S. Steve worked to maintain the Ivomec brand sales and margin in the face of branded competition and one of the most aggressive generic onslaughts ever seen in the industry. Steve continues to play an important role in groundbreaking work that grows awareness and sales, leading key product introduction efforts, and authoring training materials. His in-depth experience grants him the knowledge he needs to guide innovative work. But Steve doesn't rest on past success. He's always staying one step ahead of the field, quick to share the latest findings with anyone and all. He's driven to make sure veterinarians, beef and cattle producers, dairy producers, and the media understand best practices and treatments for strategic parasite control. And he's a tireless sponsor of industry conferences and events and shares his 30-plus years of knowledge in the cattle insecticide business. Steve has always been a NAMA supporter, participating in conferences and judging the best of NAMA. And he's also an active member of the American Marketing Association and the Direct Marketing Association. With that, please join me in congratulating Steve Vanderberg.
This was hot out of the box, Steve. All those thirsty people with their water bottles, too.
I can't tell you how honored I am to receive this award. The award really belongs to a lot of people who I have worked with and learned from, observed, mentored, been mentored by, and over the years just had a great opportunity to learn from a tremendous number of people. When I started out in growing up in the prairies of Montana, I never dreamt that I would be here today. And it is a very great honor, and this honor belongs to everyone that I've worked with over the years. I guess what I want to tell you today is that it's very important for you to look in your organizations and find people that you can mentor and bring forward in our industry. That's important because, as we all know, the American farmer and rancher are the most efficient producers of food and fiber in the world. And they're efficient because of their hard work and their unbridled optimism. And they're also efficient because of what you do. People in this room make new, more efficient machinery. People in this room come up with new hybrid plants and crops. People in this room find ways to get the news about those new products to farmers and ranchers. People in this room find ways to market and advertise and promote those things. So you play a very, very critical role, a role that in the past might have been carried out by the government, but the government doesn't fund anymore. So I want you to give yourselves a big hand for the important role that you play in agriculture, and remember that chance favors the prepared mind. Thank you.
Congratulations, Steve, once again. And now I'm excited to introduce the speaker I know you're going to enjoy. I've seen some videos and some presentations he's given, and I think you're in for a special treat this morning. His name is Josh Schlinkner. Josh is on a mission to make the world a more creative place, driving meaningful change through innovation, which ties in very nicely to our themes today. He's the New York Times best-selling author of Disciplined Dreaming, a proven system to drive breakthrough creativity. He's the CEO and managing partner of the Detroit Venture Partners, where he plays a key role in a well-publicized venture to turn around his hometown of Detroit, Michigan, which has been extremely successful. He's the founder and former CEO of ePrize, the largest interactive promotion agency in the world, providing digital marketing services for 74 of the top 100 brands. Prior to ePrize, Josh was the founder and CEO of 3 other successful technology companies. He's been honored as the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year and as a President Barack Obama Champion of Change Award recipient. Josh is a columnist for Forbes and the Detroit Free Press. His work on innovation and urban revitalization has been featured by the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, CNN, and the New York Times. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Josh Schlinkner to the stage.
Well, thanks so much, and I love that Louis Pasteur quote about chance favoring the prepared mind. Now, once again, congratulations on a well-deserved award. Does anyone remember a clementine? Well, apparently, these little devices, cuties, as we know them today, used to be called clementines until a brilliant act of marketing came by and branded them. Today, this is one of the most profitable cash crops in the United States. Well, I should say legal cash crops in the United States. They're selling 75 million boxes, 5-pound boxes a year. And this has become a dynamic and powerful brand in what ordinarily had been perceived as a commodity, in the same way that Kleenex trumps the word tissue paper. It's no wonder, because this innovation came by way of the same marketers that took pomegranate juice and branded it, and also the same folks that took water and branded it as Fiji. We're seeing marketing breakthroughs coming at a rapid pace. Chobani is another one, came from a startup. 2005, a person who had a cheese factory launches this brand and tied into some consumer trends about healthful living, this whole tart yogurt concept. Launches Chobani. It's a billion-dollar brand today in 2013. It was partly through agricultural innovation, but it was also through the hands of some very adept marketers. One of my favorite food marketing stories of late is the Doritos Taco Bell combo. So think about the innovation. There's no product innovation whatsoever, technically. But they brought 2 forces together. Everyone loves Doritos, everyone loves Taco Bell. And in the initial launch year, this was a $600 million product launch. So what we're seeing is a theme where marketing and food science, marketing and agriculture are coming together to create extraordinary value for consumers and stakeholders. I have a question for you. What do these brands have in common? Gone. Many of them are absolutely gone. What else? They were once market leaders, absolutely right. And I also heard over here they failed to change. So as if that was planted response, perfectly right on the money. Because these were all market leaders in their day. They were the dominant players in their field. They are now hurting terribly, many of them gone. And by the way, these aren't just logos in a business school case study. These are real human beings behind these companies and families and towns that have been decimated because they failed to innovate. They failed to continue to drive forward and simply rested on the success of their past. The lesson here that we all need to embrace, even in times of prosperity, is that we can never become intoxicated by the success of the past. We must always be the source of disruption. We need to always, as marketers, as agricultural professionals, be pushing forward and discovering the new possibilities. And the world dynamics today, the business dynamics, are so radically different than they were just a few years ago. I'll give you a fun example. You think about Gillette. There couldn't be a more dominant brand in their category, which in this case is razors. They have a 70% market share, billions of dollars of ad muscle, and they're in nearly every retail outlet. How could somebody possibly compete with Gillette? Well, I want to show you how someone did just that. This isn't a Saturday Night Live skit. It's an actual company that launched less than 12 months ago and is taking this giant head on. I have a short video for you. Let's check it out.
Hi, I'm Mike, founder of DollarShaveClub.com. What is DollarShaveClub.com? Well, for $1 a month, we send high-quality razors right to your door. Yeah, $1. Are the blades any good? No. Our blades are f***ing great. Each razor has stainless steel blades, an aloe vera lubricating strip, and a pivot head. It's so gentle a toddler could use it. And do you like spending $20 a month on brand name razors? 19 go to Roger Federer. I'm good at tennis. And do you think your razor needs a vibrating handle, a flashlight, a back scratcher, and 10 blades? Your handsome-ass grandfather had 1 blade and polio. Looking good, pop up! Stop paying for shave tech you don't need. And stop forgetting to buy your blades every month. Alejandro and I are going to ship them right to you. We're not just selling razors, we're also making new jobs. Alejandro, what were you doing last month?
Not working.
What are you doing now?
Working.
I'm no Vanderbilt, but this train makes hay. So stop forgetting to buy your blades every month and start deciding where you're going to stack all those dollar bills I'm saving you. We are DollarShaveClub.com, and the party is on.
I know karate, I know jiu-jitsu, I drive like a gangster when I'm coming to see you, see you, see you, see you.
So this was great, right? So this guy, Mike, launches his company less than 12 months ago. He spent $4,000 to produce this video, $0 on paid media. After the first week of launch, this video had been seen by 3 million people around the world. At the end of that same week, Mike had 17,000 paying customers. If you do the math, this guy just launched a $60 million a year business in a commodity industry with a deeply entrenched market leader at a $1 price point. That is the power of not only great marketing, that's the power of human creativity. And that is the most important attribute that all of us need to continue to drive the agricultural industry forward. So I want to challenge you today a little bit to think about creativity differently than perhaps you have in the past. In our world that has become so complex and so competitive, creativity, in fact, has become the currency of success. It's gone from a nice to have to mission critical. And we can also deploy our creativity in different ways. Often we think about creativity as it relates to a product or service. So obviously, if we re-engineer a new plant strain, that's a very creative act. Or we come up with a new way to better utilize land. Again, wildly creative. But it doesn't stop there. Creativity can also be applied to the way in which we do our business, how we're producing our goods or services, how we're handling our internal processes. And additionally, especially for those folks in this room in the marketing side of the fence, how we communicate and how we tell our story. If Mike launched his razor blade company, and it was just boring text on a white background, nobody would care. But because he launched in a powerful way that couldn't be ignored, his company took off. Same thing with Cuties, same thing with Doritos Tacos, same thing with Chobani Yogurt. Recent study of 1,500 CEOs across 32 countries. And they were asking, what is the single most important attribute, leadership attribute, for the next 5 years of business? Is it financial acumen? Operational excellence? Turns out, hands down, the number one most cited attribute was creativity. And it starts to make sense because the world is so complex. We can't follow an operating manual and expect to win. Folks at all levels of an organization need to be able to deal with ambiguity, need to be able to innovate in real time. And you think about the world that we're living in today. Today we live in a world of dizzying speed, exponential change, and ruthless competition. So it's incumbent on us to tap into this natural attribute, this gift of creativity, not just to thrive, but ultimately to survive, because it becomes the one source of sustainable competitive advantage. It's the one thing that can't be outsourced. And as we know, creativity is a human gift. It's not an organizational gift. So General Electric or John Deere or Conagra Foods, as an entity, can't be creative. Only the people inside those organizations can. So it becomes our responsibility to drive that creativity from all levels of the organization. So despite the obvious need for more creativity in all sectors, frankly, of our society, we're facing a pretty big problem. The problem is that rather than rising to meet the challenges of the day, our creativity as a country is declining. What's going on? I can tell you a quick example through the eyes of my daughter, Chloe. So Chloe was in art class a couple years ago, and the teacher said, "Hey, Chloe, go draw a picture of a bear." No problem. The thing is, she wasn't thinking this. So instead of drawing like a standard bear, she drew this bear that was purple and funky shaped, and she's all excited to share her work with the teacher. So she runs over to the teacher and she hands her the page, and she's waiting for praise and admiration. You know what the teacher said? "Hey, Chloe, that's not what bears look like. Bears aren't that color. Go back and redo it." So in that moment, it wasn't that she lost her gift of creativity. She has that as a human being. In fact, we all have that as human beings. But she learned a terrible lesson that unfortunately we teach our kids and each other on a daily basis. Don't be all that creative. Stay within the lines. That's not what bears look like. Funny. Ever see one of these? Anyone know what these are called, by the way? These are called ugly dolls. This is a fantastically successful entrepreneurial success story. In fact, it was the 2007 Toy of the Year. And when Sasha Obama went to her first day of school in Washington, D.C., she walked in clutching to the security of her ugly doll. Do you notice a disconnect? We teach this, yet we reward that. We're taught in school to follow the rules, guess what the teacher knows, there's only one right answer, and whatever you do, don't make any mistakes. But if you run that game plan in the real world, especially if you run that game plan in the agricultural industry, It's a surefire path to mediocrity. Doing exactly the opposite is what allows us to seize our full potential. Another quick study I'll share because it's so important to get a context of where we're coming from so we can climb out of these challenges. Researchers wanted to understand the impact that schools are having on kids' levels of creativity. So they asked kindergartners a simple question. They did a study. And they asked kindergartners, are you creative? 98% of those kids raised their hand and said, yes, I'm creative. They then asked the same question to graduating high school seniors. The numbers dropped a bit. Can you guess what they dropped to? 30%? I heard 40%. 3%? 2%. How does that happen? How does that happen? We send our kids to school to prepare them to meet the challenges of the day, and we're going in the exact opposite direction. So what's happening is that instead of growing into creativity, as we should, we're growing out of it. Now, to be clear, I'm not vilifying teachers. Teachers are absolutely heroes. The issue is that we have a system that is out of date. And all of us grew up in that system, and our kids continue to grow up in that system. So as marketers, as leaders in the communities that we live in, we need to fight tooth and nail against these forces. So now that I bummed you out today, there's good news. In fact, there's great news. Harvard runs a study, and they ask the age-old question, is creativity born or is it developed? Is it nature or nurture? Here's what they found. Creativity, in fact, is 85% learned behavior. Think about what that means for a second. That means you and I, on our groggiest day, have 85% the creative capacity as Mozart or Da Vinci or Louis Pasteur. The problem is that we don't feel that way. We just learned that 98% of adults don't feel that way at all. Makes you wonder why not. Why don't we feel so creative? There's a couple big barriers, and I want to share them because if you can conquer them, you can unleash this gift inside yourself and your organizations. There's a couple big ones. One big one is labeling. For some reason in our society, we attribute job title with level of creativity. In other words, we think musicians are creative and statisticians are not. Meanwhile, there are musicians in professional orchestras, and they play the notes on the page beautifully, but they're not creating much of anything. Good technicians, maybe not all that creative. On the other hand, we've seen how creative accountants can get. All kidding aside, your job title has nothing to do with your ability to be a creative person. So we think that folks in advertising are really creative. Maybe that's, we all have that capacity. But if somebody is in plant operations or somebody is in seed irrigation, that doesn't mean you don't have the ability to be a creative person. So I want to do a quick little warm-up, and then we're going to dive in, and I'm going to share some techniques and some ideas that you can take with you and put to use immediately. But I wanted you to first take a quick peek at this picture and imagine that it's a snapshot from a movie. So like there's something leading up to this scene, something's happening right now, something's about to happen. Don't put too much thought into it. It's not an overly complex exercise. Give it 2 seconds of thought, raise your hand and let me know what could be going on in this movie. What do you think? She just witnessed an accident. Excellent. Hopefully it was a calm accident, but just witnessed an accident. Ooh, she's being followed. Maybe we got a little spy action going on. One over here. She's being followed by the purple bear. I love it. Getting super creative on me. She's calling her friend on a cell. She's getting a ticket, and she doesn't have her seatbelt on. All good points. Excellent. What else? What about back here? Just ordered some Jimmy John's. What if it was a science fiction movie? What do you think would be going on here? Ooh, aliens are coming to get her. What's one more from over here? I like it. A sea creature is after her. So here's the thing. We probably could go on all morning. How did you know that? You were able to make it up, and this was a very easy exercise for us because there is no rules, there's no wrong answers, there's no fear of retribution or punishment, and you're able to get your creative juices flowing very quickly. Even the people that came into this room, grumpy, arms folded, saying, oh, I'm not a creative person, even if you didn't share something, I know you were thinking it, because that's just the way the mind works. This is just a fun warm-up exercise. The next time you want to get your team really rolling, grab a random picture from the internet or a magazine and just ask, what's going on in this movie? Okay, so I had the privilege of writing a book on this topic, on creativity, called Disciplined Dreaming. And just as a quick backdrop, I'm an entrepreneur by trade. I've started, built, and sold 4 tech companies, 2 in the marketing world, by the way, and now I run a venture capital firm in downtown Detroit. And layman's terms, what that means is I invest in startups. So I have the opportunity, a front row seat, to seeing very cutting edge stuff and very cutting edge creativity on a near daily basis. In doing the research, though, for the book, I had the privilege to interview over 200 thought leaders. So I interviewed artists, musicians, billionaires, CEOs, nonprofit leaders, and I tried to boil all that collective wisdom down into a step-by-step process to unleash creative capacity. What I was trying to do is demystify the creative process. As we know, in agriculture and marketing, there are steps and systems for just about everything. Yet creativity is often left to happen by chance. So I tried to say, is there a way to make it more simple? Which is why I'd like to share some of the ideas with you this morning from the book. So we're going to take a hard look at 4 things you can do, 4 big ideas to drive creativity in yourself, in your organizations, and even in your communities. The first big idea is the need to encourage courage. It turns out that fear is the single biggest blocker of creativity. It's that insidious force that strips us of our true capacity. And we've all done it. You know, you're in a meeting and you have a great idea, but instead of sharing the idea, you hold it back. And you say, well, if it was such a good idea, someone else probably would have already said it. Or what will my boss think? Who's going to fund this idea? If it goes forward and it doesn't work out, what does that mean to my career? I better just keep my mouth shut. The problem is, if you breed fear in your organization, you are missing the single most powerful natural resource at your disposal. It would be like only working a third of your land. So a much more productive approach, and the antidote for this, is to celebrate new ideas and simply remove judgment altogether. Let's say, for example, someone on your team comes to you with an idea, and let's just say it's a bad idea. It happens. What's your instinct? Your instinct is to say, terrible idea, go back to your cube. The problem is, if you do that, you've just trained that person to never come forward with another idea again. A much more productive approach would be not to lie and say it's a good idea if it's not, but just to remove judgment and say something like, tell me more about that idea. What was the thinking that led you to that conclusion? What could you add to this to make it even better? So now that person goes back to their desk feeling understood and heard. They may come back with several bad ideas in a row, but so what? Because eventually they may show up with the game-changing, transformative idea you've been waiting for that would have never come to the surface had you do what many of us do and simply suppress ideas. Another big part of encouraging courage is to get curious. It turns out that curiosity is very much the building block of creativity. So the more curious you are, the more creative you will become. How do you do this? The simplest way is, instead of reaching conclusions, which we all tend to do quickly in the business world, is to ask a lot more questions. And ideally questions that start with one of these three phrases: why, what if, or why not? Because when you ask these questions, it forces you to challenge conventional wisdom. It forces you to imagine what can be instead of just what is. Mike did exactly that. What if I sold razors online? Why do blades need to be sold at retail? Blades are never sold on a subscription basis. Why not? And that same type of curiosity led to Mike's breakthrough. And the same type of curiosity can lead to all of ours. Another really fun and easy technique was pioneered by Toyota. It's called the 5 whys. And what you do is, if you're trying to wrestle an issue right to the ground, you ask why something and keep asking that question again and again, at least 5 times. So for example, why is my productivity on my farmland not reaching the potential that it could be, or the output that it did last year? Get the answer to that and say, why that? Get the answer again and say, why that? So if you do it 5 times in a row, it's unbelievable how the curiosity and creativity bubble to the surface. So I want to show you a brief video demonstration of the 5 whys in action by comedian Louis C.K. Let's check it out.
See a mother with her baby in McDonald's, and the little girl says something like, "Mama, what are those people doing over there?" And she just says, just shut up and eat your French fries. You know? And you think, what a mean mother. Why doesn't she just answer her and open her horizons? Well, you don't know what you're talking about. Because when a kid asks why something, you tell her why. She wants to know why that. And then you tell her why that. She wants to know why that. And you try to come up with an answer that stops, but you can't. And she takes every idea and deconstructs it to the point where I don't even know who I am anymore when we're done talking. Like the other day she says to me, Papa, why is it hot? Because it's summertime. Why? Because it's that time of year. Why? Because the sun is closer to the earth. Why? Because it's tilted on its axis. Why? I don't know. Why? I just didn't pay attention when they taught me this stuff in school. I didn't really listen. I didn't think it was important. Why? Because I smoked a lot of pot and I just didn't have any values. Why? Because my parents didn't raise me very well. They just didn't pay attention to me. Why? Because they just had sex in a car and here I am and they resent me for taking their youth. Why? Because they have no moral compass, because they had bad parents, and it just keeps going like that. Why? Because there's no God and we're alone and there's no point to anything. I'm only stopping to be polite to you. It goes on for hours and it gets so abstract. It's like, why? Well, because some things are and some things are not. Why? Because things that are not can't be. Why? Because then nothing would not be. Something has to isn't. Everything can't is. Why? Just shut up and eat your French fries, all right? Just shut up.
So I think you'll remember the 5 whys technique at this point. Incidentally, that's the only Louis C.K. clip that would be appropriate for a corporate audience. There's a huge myth about creativity. And the myth is that when you have an idea, it comes out fully hatched, ready for prime time, totally baked, in like a binder with tabs, ready and fully defensible. And that's not how creativity really works. Most big breakthroughs, across all industries, are generally a series of setbacks and failures that ultimately lead to something special. It's the old saying that every bullseye is the result of 100 misses. But for us, when we launch an idea that isn't perfect, we then immediately go to this dark place of saying, well, I'm not creative, it wasn't very good, I'm going to move on to something else. A good example, I think, of the way to approach it is WD-40. I don't know if you know this, but the name stands for Water Displacement 40th Experiment. Could have easily been WD-31. What the folks at WD-40 know, and what we all need to embrace, is that mistakes are not fatal. Mistakes are simply the portals of discovery. I'll show you some fun examples from the book of how companies are supporting this type of responsible, risk-taking approach. One company that I interviewed issues, every year they do a Failure of the Year award. So they have this big banquet, and they celebrate the team member of the year and the project of the year, but they also celebrate the failure of the year. This is for the team or individual that had a great idea. Their numbers made sense, they went for it, didn't work out at all. But good for them. So instead of punishing failure, they celebrated it. Think about the message that drives deep into the DNA of this organization about taking responsible risks and letting your creativity shine. Another company that I interviewed issues every team member 2 corporate get-out-of-jail-free cards each year. Here's what they say. Go out on a limb, be creative, do your best work, and if you really screw something up, hand us one of these cards, you're off the hook, no questions asked. On an annual review, a team leader will actually be disappointed with a team member if they haven't used both of them. So you say to yourself, wow, is that risky? Perhaps, but what's the risk of not doing something like this? Irrelevance? Mediocrity? Getting passed by? So many organizations, so many people live their lives trying to play it safe, only to discover that playing it safe has become the riskiest move of all. Second big idea I'd like you to consider is the need to shed the past. I think Polaroid is probably the best example of this. Polaroid was the dominant player in instant photography for 50 years. And when you study their demise, people would knock on the door of the executives, both internal folks and consultants on the outside, and say, hey, we've got to move into digital, we've got to change our ways, we've got to forge ahead. And they were consistently met with the same rejection. Well, we can't cannibalize our core business. Have you heard that expression? You can't cannibalize something? No offense to anybody, I think it's a fairly dumb expression. Because it implies that you can prevent cannibalization. It implies that any organization has all-encompassing, world-dominating, market-changing power. Polaroid doesn't, and nobody else does as well. I think a much more productive approach would be to flip that on its head and always want to be the cannibal. In fact, I think that's all of our responsibilities, to always be the source of disruptive change, to disrupt instead of being disrupted. I'll argue that no matter the size of your company, how much experience, how much legacy or heritage, someday a company will come along and put you out of business. Might as well be you. We each have that choice as an organization and even people. I really do. I try to put the Josh of 6 months ago out of business by staying always on the forefront of reinvention and letting go of previous successes. So the anecdote here is not just to challenge assumptions, but to hunt them down and kill them. So I built this company called ePrize. I started in 1999, and we sold the company last year, and actually worked with many of the folks in this room, both on the agency and direct client side. Ended up working with 74 of the top 100 brands doing digital promotions. Anyway, I became very nervous when I would hear things in our company, even though we were only 13 years old, saying, oh, that's just the way we do it around here, or that's just the way it's done in our industry. To me, them's are fighting words. So here's how we combated it at our company. I found this cute little fable, and I told it again and again, and it became part of our culture. It goes something like this. There's a 10-year-old girl, and she's making meatloaf in the kitchen with her mom. Like they've done every time before they put the meatloaf in the oven, they cut both ends off of it. Well, that little girl gets curious, and she says, "Hey, Mom, why are we cutting the ends off the meatloaf before we put it in the oven?" Mom says, "Gee, honey, I don't know. That's the way I've always done it. That's the way my mom taught me. Let's call Grandma and ask." So they get on the phone, they call Grandma. "Hey, Grandma, we're making meatloaf. We're cutting the ends off before we put it in the oven. Why do we do that?" Well, the grandma laughs. "I don't know either. That's the way I've always done it. That's the way my mom taught me. Let's call great-grandma and ask." So perhaps this was done through Skype. I'm not exactly sure. But the little girl, the mom, and the grandma call great-grandma. "Hey, great-grandma, we're making meatloaf in the kitchen. We're cutting the ends off before we put it in the oven. Why do we do that?" Well, great-grandmother laughs hysterically. She says, "I have no idea why you're doing it. I used to do it because I didn't have a big enough pan." So we took this little fable and ran with it. And at our company, we identified a new noun, a meatloaf, which was a system or a process or a way of doing business that maybe made all the sense in the world in the past, but today was irrelevant. Or today, at least there was a better way. You want a fun exercise when you leave this cool conference? Go back to your team, grab a few people, tell the story, and set a timer for 10 minutes. And say, all we're going to go for is quantity. Let's see how many meatloaves we can identify here at our company in 10 minutes. It's not about judging the past or pointing fingers. It's simply about identifying opportunities for change. You will leave that 10-minute period with 3 pages of notes, big and small, of how you can deploy your creativity to drive progress. So this guy, Coach K, is the winningest college coach in history, in NCAA basketball. Anyway, I want to share this philosophy that he has. What's that? Men's basketball, I apologize. Good point. Good point. Men's basketball. So he has this philosophy, though, that I wanted to share. It's not about sports. It's about a philosophy that he has. After every single play, you can hear his team, those on the sidelines, the coaching staff, and the players chant something out. Next play. Next play. So this is his philosophy in that no matter what happened in the previous play, let's say there was a wonderful steal, they grabbed the ball, they dunked it, huge victory, the crowd erupts, doesn't matter. Next play. Because if they start focusing on what just happened, they're going to miss the nuances of the next step. Similarly, if they had a stunning setback, time is running out, all kinds of challenging things happening, next play. Let's get our whole focus squarely on the challenges ahead of us. This applies to all of us too. In the business world, LinkedIn, the day they went public, there was a lot of LinkedIn millionaires. They had these black t-shirts printed up for all 8,000 of their employees. The front of the t-shirt said their stock symbol. Back of the t-shirt simply said, next play. So when you're thinking about your own organization and you're thinking about the agriculture reports from last year or the quarterly sales numbers or your forecasts or whatever you're dealing with, it's all about thinking what lays ahead, not getting tripped up on an obstacle from the past. One of the cool things, I was thinking about this conference is a company called AgHub that's exhibiting here at the conference. And actually, if you are interested in a copy of my book, I'm going to be signing books over there at their booth at 3 o'clock. But this is kind of a neat company because they're taking the whole world of agriculture and the digital landscape, putting it together in one place, and finding ways to better serve marketers and producers in a very elegant and modern way. They're borrowing ideas from other industries and specifically doing it in the agricultural space. I'm not trying to be like a paid endorser or anything for them, but I want to say that they're doing it in a remarkable and creative way because they're thinking about what lies ahead. They're not saying, let's launch a model from the past. They're saying, next play, next play. The other big thing that you can do in terms of shedding the past is how you tell your story. Now, as marketers, as we know, storytelling is just about everything. It's the difference between winning and losing. Now, if you want a tough storytelling challenge, try telling the story of my hometown, Detroit, Michigan. As you'll know, this town has been battered in the media for decades, and rightfully so. We've done a lot of things, and many of our wounds are self-inflicted. As a tech entrepreneur, I would travel around the country, and when I would tell people I was from Detroit, I'd get this weird look, like this weird sideways look. They say, "You're from where?" Until 2 years ago. Now I get a different response. I hear things like, "Wow, I hear what's going on. Tell me more." Part of that was through storytelling. Chrysler did an amazing job when they launched this campaign, which you probably saw in the Super Bowl, imported from Detroit. They took our most poignant negative assets, the setbacks and challenges, and pivoted into something really magical. The line that really hits me in that commercial is that the hottest fires forge the hardest steel. That's a powerful message that we can own. So as marketers crafting work for your clients and yourselves, how are you thinking about your own story? How are you making sure that you can stand out above the nonstop noise that exists in your own industry? My partners and I are now trying to promote the city of Detroit as a place for real business and trying to drop a lot of the negative stigma of the past. We produced a TV commercial that we ran in the World Series and have run a number of times since then. I'll show it to you because I want to give you a sense of how we're trying to change the story of a very difficult situation, and hopefully it can serve as a model for what you can do in your own organizations. Check it out.
Opportunity. It doesn't stare you in the face. It's not going to yell at you to come and get it. It doesn't knock. So what does opportunity look like? Not what you might think. You see, opportunity is not a right. It's definitely not equal. And it doesn't come with an instruction manual. That's because opportunity isn't found. It's molded, it's built, it's created. It's as much about grit as it is intellect. An explosive high-tech corridor located at the intersection of muscle and brains? You bet. Because opportunity only comes to those already in the game. What does opportunity look like? It looks like Detroit. Opportunity made in Detroit.
I think also when you're passionate about something, it shines, you know? So if you're passionate about the work that you're doing for your clients, or I know there's many direct people in the room that are being represented by agencies, that passion comes through. So Kid Rock is a friend of ours, and he did that because he cares about our city. So the more that we can tap into that passion, that authentic passion, the more those stories will really shine. Another thing that I think is so important is differentiation. We all are on airplanes a lot, and airplanes are nearly indistinguishable. You almost forget which airline you're on. You know, same bad food, same bad peanuts, that kind of thing. Unless, of course, you happen to be flying on Kulula Airlines in South Africa. Now, Kulula has a little fun. And the fun exists beyond just the paint shop. They don't take themselves so darn seriously. They want to tell their story in a meaningful and memorable way. And it goes beyond just how they decorate. These are some actual things that have been overheard on Kulula Airline flights. Thanks for flying Kulula. We hope you enjoyed giving us the business as much as we enjoyed taking you for a ride. Here's one. We're pleased to announce that we have some of the best flight attendants in the industry. Unfortunately, none of them are on this flight. Or my favorite, ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to smoke, the smoking section is on the wing. If you can light them, you can smoke them. Now, in an industry that has been plagued with bankruptcy, plagued with setbacks, Kulula has enjoyed double and triple-digit growth for decades. Consistently growing, consistently winning. Now, it's not only because they tell their story in a kitschy, fun, creative way, but it does play a part of it. It's got to be authentic. I mean, this doesn't work for every brand in this room. But if you can tell your story in a way that can't be ignored, it's going to get a big step along that journey of getting to the results that we seek. All right, the third big idea is difficult for many of us, especially those that have enjoyed some success, is the need to reject bureaucracy. So often we think that rules are rules and we can't do much about them, and someone important put them in place. So for example, you look at a standard pill bottle. And I know there's some product developers in the room, so I wanted to share this example. This is what we think. It's a white cap. It's difficult to read. A lot of the real estate is taken up by a scanning bar and the medical sign. Not exactly the most user-friendly bottle. There's actually a lot of problems with this. There's hundreds of cases a year where people take the wrong medication, like maybe you take your spouse's medication by accident, or you take too much or too little or the wrong dosage. So nonetheless, people continue to make pill bottles that look identical. Makes me wonder, why did it take a design student in her senior year of college to come up with something truly remarkable? Now these pill bottles, which are now fully embraced by Target, are totally different. Notice the cap is on the bottom. The medication is clearly labeled on the top, so you can't ignore it. It's not tilted sideways. There are colorful bands. So if I was in the house, maybe my band would be the green band, and my kid's band would be the yellow band, so you don't get the medications confused. There's no wasted real estate on the label. There's actually a pull-out card. It says patient pull-out card, which tells you more information about dosage and recommended usage. It would be very difficult to argue that the previous bottle is any better. Yet, for decades, people just said that's just the way it happens. We, as leaders, as marketers, need to reject bureaucracy, need to reject the rules just because someone told us they used to exist, in favor of what is the optimal situation for the challenges of the day. So the antidote for all this feels a little counterintuitive. What I would suggest that you do is think small. Now, I don't mean think small thoughts. I know we're all thinking big, giant, game-changing thoughts. But I mean think like a startup. Startups, entrepreneurs, are often the ones that have the courage to do something radically different, to change the status quo. Now, the good news is that you don't have to be small to think small. There's this company called ITW. It's a $16 billion manufacturing company, 90 years old. Not exactly a startup. But every time a business unit reaches a certain size, they actually splice it in half. Their thinking is they'd rather have lots of these little, smaller, scrappy, hungry, aggressive business units competing with each other for resources, rather than one giant $16 billion bureaucratic swamp. So thinking small is a mindset, has nothing to do with your balance sheet or your head count. So let's give you an example of thinking small in action. Again, a mindset, not a size of a company. There's a guy named Doug Dietz. Doug is the head of the GE division that makes MRI equipment. And throughout his 20-plus year career, Doug has saved thousands of lives. But Doug was stuck on a problem. And the problem is that while these machines are terrific and all, kids hate them. It turns out that 80% of small children needed to be sedated before going into these life-saving procedures. Well, Doug tried all the obvious things. He said, okay, I'll make the opening bigger, or I'll try shortening the cycle time. But none of those yielded the important medical results that he was going after. So he had to think small. He had to say, what would a startup do? If I had a blank sheet of paper, I could start from scratch, how would I approach this problem? And here's what he came up with. He said, if I can't change the machine, I better change the experience. He launched Pirate Island. And you'll see that in addition to redecorating, he actually trained the hospital workers to tell the story differently. It was no longer, hey, you're going this big, scary machine. Stand still or else. It was, you're going on an adventure. And when you're sailing around the 7 seas, make sure that you stand really still so those pirates don't come by and tickle you. Here's what happened. Sedation ended. Crying and screaming stopped. And Doug knew he had reached his goal when one day a 7-year-old girl, a cancer patient, tugged on her mom's shirt after this procedure and said, "Hey, Mom, can we come again tomorrow?" That is the power of small company thinking, taking a creative leap in action. So let's quickly examine the difference between small company thinking and big company thinking. Small company thinking is about embracing risk instead of avoiding it. It's the difference between urgency and being slow moving, creating new ideas versus just protecting the old ones. It's the difference in small companies where ideas bottom up, they come from everywhere, as opposed to bigger organizations where they're only forced from the top down. The difference between being idea-centric and rules-centric. Nimble versus bureaucratic. Having a fire in the belly versus becoming complacent. If you want my prescription, my humble opinion on how to make this organization, this association, sing for the next 5 or 10 years, how to make our industry continue to rocket to heights never even dreamed of before, it's to fully embrace the column on the left, to think like entrepreneurs who are willing and have the courage to change the world. I'll give you a couple fun, a little less dramatic examples in real time. It's a picture of my company, ePrize. A couple years back, we had a good month, and I wanted to share the wealth a bit. But when I added up what I could afford to give everybody as a bonus, it was only about $200 a person. Not very exciting. So I had to get creative. I had to think small. Here's what I did. It was a Thursday afternoon. I unplugged the servers, turned off the phone system, and said, "Guys, I'm kidnapping the company." I took everybody to the closest Best Buy, gave everyone a $200 gift card, and said, "You have to spend this right now." So pandemonium erupts. People are racing up and down the aisles. "Oh, did you get the Xbox? Did you get the digital camera?" Those poor cashiers at Best Buy, because we had like 300 people attacking them. But here's the thing. If I gave out that bonus, it would have been forgotten in 24 hours. In this case, 18 months later, people were still talking about the day that we kidnapped the company. So what I want to encourage you to do, sometimes our instinct when you're faced with a challenge is to throw money at it or throw resources at it. I'm saying try throwing your imagination at it, and you may end up with a far better result. Another quick example, personal example I'll share with you, is that creativity can come from anywhere if you set up a culture that supports it. It's not something that only comes from people with fancy titles. Our little company, ePrize, we gave away stuff online. We did sweepstakes for major brands, especially early on. Anyway, very early on in our company's life, we won an account from United Airlines. This was like a big break for us. And we were to run a contest for them in which the prize was $1 million chance to win, and you could enter from a number of different countries. So, lots of different countries around the world, one prize. Anyway, we were psyched, we're slapping high five. This was a game changer for us. Well, we had to produce the official rules and regulations. And as we started doing the research after we signed the account, it turns out that a drawing of this nature has to be done if you're going to make it eligible for people in Brazil. It has to be done on Brazilian soil. Cool, no problem. Double win, we're going to Rio, slapping high five again. Until we found out that a drawing of this nature to be eligible for folks in Australia had to be done within the physical boundaries of Australia. What do you do? Now, we didn't have an extra $1 million to give away. I couldn't go back to my new big client and tell him I screwed up the account. What do? I couldn't run an illegal promotion on behalf of United Airlines. Well, the answer didn't come from me. It didn't come from the SVP or EVP of whatever. It came from a person on our legal team, an individual team member contributor. And here's what she said. And this is actually what we did. She said, "Let's do the drawing in the Brazilian embassy in Australia." It is. It's technically Brazilian soil and technically within the boundaries of Australia. That creative act saved our company. And it would have not come to surface if we had always been cranking from the top down and had that bureaucratic sense about us. Instead, because we thought like a startup, we enabled that idea to come forward. All right, the fourth big idea for today is the absolute need to run your own race. If Mike launched his razor blades, put them right next to Gillette in the store, and he had a blue package instead of an orange package, who cares? Let's face it, the world doesn't need another Me Too solution. The world doesn't need another Me Too anything. Why do we want another commodity? What the world craves and will pay handsomely for is originality and people that are willing to stand out from the pack. From a marketer standpoint, I think one of the best examples I could share is that of Dove. Dove, as you know, is a beauty brand. And the way that most beauty brands market themselves is like this. Step 1, hire an anorexic supermodel. Step 2, doctor her up on the computer. Step 3, run a bunch of very expensive high-paid ads. Step 4, hope for the best. Dove could have done the same thing, but instead they did something courageous. They said, I'm going to do the exact opposite. So they launched this campaign called Evolution. In fact, what they did is they exposed the whole rest of the industry as imposters. They saw a flock, and they sprinted in the opposite direction. They said, I'm not going to celebrate outer beauty, I'm going to celebrate inner beauty. I'm not going to celebrate doctored up, fake-looking women, I'm going to celebrate real women. Now, this was a big, bold, scary move for them to make. They launched it online with a single TV commercial, well, single video, which ultimately became a TV commercial. I'll show you the video, and then I'll tell you how it did. Check it out.
Very quiet, please. Camera's rolling. And we're recording sound. Slate it.
So Dove launches this video online. And before they placed their single first paid ad, this video had been seen by 32 million people around the world. When Dove saw how consumers embraced it, they shifted their entire marketing budget. And this has gone on to become one of the most enduring and prolific ad campaigns in history. In the rest of the industry, which was clawing and scratching for single-digit growth, Dove sales soared. And it's just another reminder about the absolute importance to run your own race. This applies to us as individuals, too. This guy's named Phil. So Phil was looking for a job, like many people in marketing. Phil was a web designer. And Phil was having a heck of a time. Resumes everywhere, no one calling him back, because his resume looked exactly like everybody else. He didn't stand out at all. So here's what Phil did. He did something remarkable. And if we could put this up on both screens for a second, Phil made an Amazon page of himself. It's an exact Amazon replica. So he made the logo of his name. He's got some cute things in there. He's got his height and weight, only one left in stock, order soon. He's got his languages that he speaks. He's got a 5-star ranking with different references. And if you look at the whole page, which you can just Google online, he's even got rotating banner ads. He went to meticulous lengths to make sure this was perfect. 4 hours after he launched this online, his servers crashed. Of course, then he got his servers back up and running, and it took 2 weeks for Phil to respond not to all the questions, to respond only to all the job offers. His skills didn't change. What he had to sell didn't change. But the way that he marketed himself, the way that he stood out from the rest of the herd, changed dramatically, as did the results. So, ladies in the room, did anyone know what type of shoe this is? Like 0.1 second, we got the answer. Christian Louboutins. And you probably knew, how did you know that, by the way? The red sole. So these shoes, for the guys that don't know or wear them typically, these shoes are like the hottest thing for fashionistas around the world. Christian Louboutin makes these shoes that all have a signature mark. These bright, beautiful red soles. In fact, I learned it's Pantone 187C, for anyone who's curious. And every shoe, every pump, every stiletto has the same thing. Pantone 187C on the bottom. As a result, these high-demand shoes garner up to $3,000 a pair. Now, I'm sure the quality is good, I'm sure the design is nice, but what people are really paying for is that distinction. They cannot be confused with anybody else. In 0.1 seconds, we know Pantone 187C, Christian Louboutin shoes. So my question to you, whether you are manufacturing a tractor, or whether you're an agency servicing the agricultural business, or whether you're running digital media or print media on behalf of the industry, what is your Pantone 187C? What's the thing that makes you so remarkable that you become a category of one, just like Christian Louboutin? And if you don't have that, I'd suggest you get to it quickly. So many of us say, oh, well, we offer great service and low prices and wonderful. If you try to be everything to everyone, you end up saying nothing to no one. The absolute need to be distinctive, to say something that's so powerful, so poignant, so unforgettable, is critical as marketers, and it's critical to drive this industry to the next level. We all know it. It's time to do it. So we talked about 4 big ideas today on our journey to unleash creative capacity. We talked about the need to encourage courage, to make sure that we suppress fear and promote ideas inside our organizations without judgment. The need to get curious, asking why, what if, and why not. And like Louis C.K., asking the 5 whys. We talked about the need to shed the past and get rid of our meatloafs, making sure that we're staying squarely focused on the challenge at hand. The thing is that the world that we live in today is changing at a rate like none other in history. So it's time for us to leap forward, never to clasp behind us. Next play, next play, next play. We talked about the need to reject bureaucracy and to think small, to think like an entrepreneur. How would a brand new company competing head-to-head with you that open around the block compete with you? How would they take you on? How would they win? And we also talked about the need to run your own race, to be distinctive, to run away from the flock instead of to be part of it, to find your Christian Louboutin 187C. So I want to leave you with a challenge. So many of us in our daily lives, 40 hours a week, we're heads down. You know, we're doing our transactional work, our to-do lists, and the problem is when your head's down, you don't see so much. I want to encourage you to be a little bit more heads up. Because when you're heads up, you notice things. You notice opportunities for creativity. You notice what the competition's doing. You come to events like this and become inspired and learn new best practices and cutting-edge trends. Here's my challenge for you. If you take 5% of your time in a 40-hour work week, that's only 2 hours a week. And if you do that for 30 days, not forever, for 30 days, very finite period, 2 hours a week for 30 days, and take this 5% challenge. What I want you to do, if you're able to carve out that time, schedule it just like you would another important meeting. But instead of doing to-do list items, do the 5 whys. Brainstorm a little bit. Think about what you could do to deploy your creativity or how a startup may attack the very challenges that you're facing in your own organization. 2 hours a week, 30 days. So I've issued this challenge to many people around the world, many organizations. Here's what I hear back. First thing I hear back is a 0% drop in productivity. 0. Magically, 40 hours of work get squished into 38 hours. Nobody misses a beat. But more importantly than that, I hear back the sense of wonder and imagination that becomes reconnected to the folks who give this a try. It's a gift to the organization because any one of the ideas that you may discover could become transformational. But even more importantly than that, it's a gift to you as a person because there are very few things in life as rewarding as raw human creativity. So as we leave here today, I just want you to go ahead and embrace it. It's this gift that we all have, and it's time. It's time to let your imagination soar. It's time to stick your finger in the eye of the status quo. It's time to unleash your true creative capacity. And it's time to seize the enormous opportunity that's waiting for all of us just outside those doors. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Josh, I really want to thank you for that. I know, actually, I can guarantee you that as we leave here and go back to work tomorrow or Monday, we're going to be thinking about how to develop, utilize, and nurture creativity in a whole different light. That was pretty eye-opening and very interesting, so thank you again for that. Also want to thank Syngenta for sponsoring today's keynote address. As a reminder, Josh will be signing copies of his book later in the Ag Hug booth as well. So just a few housekeeping items before we adjourn for lunch. In your registration packet, you have a coupon for tomorrow's brunch. If you're planning on attending that session, please turn in that coupon to the NAMA registration desk by 5 o'clock today to get your ticket. In addition, remember you can text NAMA to 46786 to receive valuable mobile conference information and keep your schedule up to date. Another reminder, we heard a lot about ABEF. We want you to support them by stopping by and purchasing a raffle ticket to win a flat screen TV. You can get a ticket from a student NAMA member in the silent auction section or at the NAMA registration desk. And thanks to Penton Farm Progress for sponsoring this raffle. And don't forget finally to visit the Cyber Cafe by the conference registration desk, where you can check your email on one of our computers or hook up one of yours to recharge. The Cyber Cafe is sponsored by Farm Journal Media. And with that now, we'll adjourn for lunch, which is sponsored by Ag Connect Expo. We'll see you this afternoon. Thanks.